Hey guys, Ben here today. Just want to talk to you a little bit about visceral fat and why it's so important to keep visceral fat as low as possible. For those of you that don't know, visceral fat is a particular body fat that's stored in the abdominal cavity, which in itself puts visceral fat around a lot of your major organs, as well as things like your heart, your pancreas, your liver, as well as the intestines. Now, visceral fat is known as a more dangerous fat, and it's more of an active fat within the body, because of its ability to affect hormones in a bad way. So why is visceral fat such a harmful substance? Fat cells do more than just store excess energy. They also produce hormones and inflammatory substances. Visceral fat especially produces more inflammatory substances than other fats. Over time, these hormones created by the visceral fat can promote long-lasting damage within the body, causing lasting inflammation and increase your risk of chronic disease. Having high amounts of visceral fat can leave you exposed to things like type 2 diabetes, colorectal cancer, as well as things like breast cancer, Alzheimer's disease, and also heart disease. One example from high visceral fat is an increased risk in heart disease. Long-lasting inflammation caused by visceral fat may cause plaque to form within the arteries, which will increase your risk factor for heart disease over time. Especially in the case of heart disease, you want to make sure that your heart is really functioning well and as healthy as can be. Here's a picture of two hearts, and again we've got a very healthy heart and then we've got a very unhealthy heart, and again this is down to visceral fat. You can see the visceral fat on the right has really clogged up the heart and made it difficult for the heart to pump, whereas the one on the left is functioning correctly and healthily. Visceral fat is slightly different from subcutaneous fat, which is stored all around our body. That's the fat that you might find on your arms, your neck, on your legs, as well as on your chest and on your stomach. Visceral fat though is the more internal body fat. Visceral fat usually makes up around 10% of our overall fat stores. One of the best ways you can tell if you've got high visceral fat is to do a body fat reading, where you can do either on our scales at the gym or you can do them in your local high street. And of course you can take a waist measurement that will give you a good indication of your overall visceral fat rating. Visceral fat is around 10% of your overall body fat, so if you have a large waist where you're storing a lot of body fat, if you have high levels of body fat, your visceral fat is also going to be high. If you use a visceral fat scale, it goes from 1 to 12 and 12 and above. Now below 12, 1 to 12 is a safe zone, but above 12 is an unsafe zone. We don't want to be there with visceral fat. Again, even in visceral fat 1 to 12, we still don't want to be towards those high numbers of 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Ideally, we want to be more closer to the average of 6 or 7. That's where the average lies. Ideally, we'd like to be at 1, which is very, very low visceral fat. So here's my top 5 ways to make sure you decrease visceral fat fast. Number 1, we all know exercise is good for us, but it's especially good for reducing your visceral fat. Aerobic exercise is especially good at reducing visceral fat, and especially when you increase the intensity, we usually see more visceral fat reduced in the body. Doing a combination of low intensity cardiovascular work as well as high intensity aerobic training has been shown in studies to really decrease visceral fat very, very fast, and combined with a healthy diet can maximize your visceral fat reducing ability. In many studies, they've shown that aerobic exercise can actually help reduce visceral fat without dieting at all. And combining exercise and a healthy diet is going to be far more effective to reduce your visceral fat, which is why it's our number 1 tip. Tip number 2 is eat more fiber. Fiber is a great way to slow down your digestion, and especially when it's in terms of gut health, we want to slow that right the way down and feed our body full of fiber. Fiber helps reduce visceral fat by suppressing your appetite and making you feel fuller for longer. So to get more fiber in your diet, maybe try eating things like flax seeds, potatoes, as well as other things like vegetables that are super high in fiber, as well as other things like sweet potato, grains, or things like legumes, beans, chickpeas, lentils, all super high in fiber and great for your gut health. Tip number 3, avoid eating excess sugar. Eating refined sugars contain no vitamins and no minerals, and it can also lead to weight gain. And studies have shown that people eat more refined sugars tend to gain more body fat and also gain more visceral fat. Large amounts of sugar get processed by the liver and turned into fat. This may increase visceral fat. So by reducing that intake, you'll therefore be decreasing your overall visceral fat. Number 4, drink lots of water and avoid alcohol. Making sure we're hydrated is going to be really effective in helping our body remove body fat over time. And also, it helps us feel fuller for longer, so therefore we're not going to eat as much food. Keeping our body hydrated is really going to help our body remove a lot of the visceral fat and stop it from even forming. In many studies, drinking too much alcohol has been shown to increase not only your waistline and overall body fat, but especially increase your overall visceral fat. So if you're trying to decrease your visceral fat, start by decreasing your alcohol consumption and increase that water intake. Number 5, sleep more and stress less. Studies have shown that people that sleep less gain more visceral fat. A lack of sleep may increase your visceral fat gain. Conversely, increasing your sleep may help to reduce your overall visceral fat. A 6-year study looked at 293 people, and it looked at people that slept less than 6 hours. They found that increasing sleep from 6 hours or less to 7 to 8 hours helped to reduce visceral fat gain by 26%. Getting enough sleep goes hand in hand with reducing your stress. Studies have shown that people get more sleep are also less stressed in the day. So if you find you're stressed before you go to bed, maybe try relaxing 30 minutes before you go to sleep, or take a magnesium supplement that will help you drift off into a good sleep. Stress and anxiety are common problems that may affect a lot of people. They can stimulate the body's adrenal gland to produce more cortisol, which is a stress hormone. Studies have shown that increased cortisol can increase visceral fat storage. What's more, ongoing stress can increase overeating and also worsen the problem. A good example of this would be if your waist is larger than your hips, your body is probably under stress and producing more cortisol than the average person. And remember, this larger waistline is an indication of high levels of visceral fat. So it's a good indication that you need to make a few changes in your life. A couple of things you can do to help reduce stress are things like exercise, going out with friends and family. Also, things like yoga and stretching are a great way to help reduce the overall stress of the body and also improve your physicality. Overall, visceral fat is an incredibly harmful product to the body. We want to reduce it as much as possible. Again, high levels of visceral fat will increase your chances of getting chronic diseases such as heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and even some cancers. Fortunately for you, there's proven strategies that can help us reduce our visceral fat. Just remember, exercise lots with a good diet, eating less overall sugar, try and get a lot of sleep and reduce your overall stress, and you should be on the path to reducing your visceral fat straight away. Hopefully these tips helped you, and hopefully it will lead to a happier and a healthier life for yourself.